So think about the last couple of times you've been in the kitchen cooking something. Let's say I'm cooking a soup, and you turn to the fridge and you open the fridge, and then you don't really know why you're looking inside the fridge. This experience happens more often than we think, and we tend to kind of work through it quite quickly. We remember a couple seconds later, and but it kind of signals the fact that when we're when we're at home, especially at home, or especially doing things that we do every morning, like make the coffee or make breakfast, we're kind of operating on a sort of autopilot. And this is great. This is useful because typically when we make coffee, it's the same each time. So we don't really need to be looking at or thinking about the way that the coffee beans look, or the angle that you drink the coffee cup. And we tend to be on autopilot at home, but also in different kind of mental states. So like when we're rushing, especially when we're hungover, so like when we're kind of in a sort of more daydreamy state, or we're feeling uncomfortable, or we're especially preoccupied with an important business meeting happening tomorrow, we will be on autopilot, but the autopilot won't even work properly as well, because we'll be thinking so hard. So we'll be doing things like spilling food, burning our tongues on hot food, when we can really just probably should have taken a second to blow on it, or to wait a second. Another good example of this is you find yourself choking when you're drinking like a fizzy drink out of the bottle. And what's happened is it's fizzy, yeah, but you've just kind of mindlessly opened it, started drinking it, and the aerated bubbles have caused you to burp or choke. And this has all happened totally just like unconsciously. So it's not great. And I think when we think about diet and healthy eating, we've got to think about this behavior, because if let's say 50% of the time we're kind of switched off when we're eating, and we're just kind of like mindlessly kind of opening cupboards and looking inside and grabbing things and eating, when we need to maybe not eat so much or eat healthier stuff, this autopilot mode is just not going to help us. It's going to work against us. So yeah, this applies, especially at home in kind of routines that we're used to, but also when we're shopping, when we're eating, when we're out with friends, especially. And, anytime that we're eating something and watching TV, for example, we're not really that focused on eating. So when you put all those things together, that's honestly most of the time that we're eating. Now, I wanted to speak, and I wrote a little bit about dieting. I'm really interested in thinking about how we can make diets easier for people to follow. I think diets really do help. But one interesting fact about diets is when we actually make the decision to start dieting, for example, I want to lose weight, enough's enough, I've got 5 kilos to lose, whatever it is, usually it kind of comes on from, a wedding that you're getting ready for, or some sort of turning point that's happened. Maybe a doctor's talked to you and said, hey, your blood pressure's too high, you've really got to figure something out. When we do this, we start to eat really differently. We have to eat different kinds of foods. We have to measure foods, for example, if we're calorie counting. And the portion aspect of it, or eating less fats, definitely works. That's going to have a tangible impact on your waistline. But what I think is actually interesting is the fact that because you have to be more intentional, because you have to actually look at the ingredients, you can't be in this sort of autopilot, randomly grazing mode that you're used to, because it just doesn't work, right? Because you actually have to stop for a second. So that is one benefit. People tend to get fatigued from this. They get bored of this. They get frustrated. They get angry. So it kind of backlashes and doesn't work totally. But in some ways, and for some short period of time, and for some people, diets can act as a sort of circuit breaker. And I use the word circuit breaker because that's sort of what we are as humans. We are kind of running different circuits. We're seeking pleasure. We're running away from pain. We are we are kind of getting triggered by different kind of inputs and stimuli, and we build these kind of circuits and routines as well in terms of habits. So to break that with something sudden like a diet, that can be a really beneficial thing. The flip side of diets is just because you're restricting something doesn't really work in your favor 100%. I think the really extreme version of this was someone who's never touched sugar or something. Sugar itself is not a big deal, and it can be really tricky to get past that kind of insight, but sugar is just a carbohydrate. You don't need to eat too much of it. It's actually kind of useful for some things, like if you just need to perk up before a meeting, you can give your brain a bit of glucose, and that can be really good. But the restriction can in some ways take you down another path, which is mindlessly restricting. Like, I can't touch this one thing, and we're not really looking for that. Ideally, in a perfect world, we're really making conscious decisions about stuff like food, and for most of the time, it's just not that complicated. We want to just be able to look at a chocolate bar and say, yeah, it looks interesting to me, but I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight, so I'm just going to hold off on eating. That's like the gold standard for a diet. It's not never eating chocolate again. It's not mindlessly restricting. It's not, but it's being kind of conscious of what you're eating. So let's try to find that middle line. I talk about, what this kind of breaking the habit kind of looks like. One example was when I lived in Canberra, I would walk past the 7-Eleven and buy like one of those really cheap $1 coffees, and I would often get a donut because the donuts were right next to the coffees, and it was just too nice and too hard to ignore. And after a while, I had this habit built up of eating donuts, and it was great. I started to, at one point, just kind of make coffee at home, and I just no longer needed to get that coffee. I started walking a different direction to work, and the donuts kind of fell out of that because it wasn't part of that automatic routine. So it can really work in your favor if you're able to kind of shortcut these habits. One other kind of circuit breaker, which is interesting, is hiking, and doesn't necessarily at the outset look or feel like something that would help you eat better, but there's actually a lot of structure and good habits and kind of routine built into the fact of hiking. A couple of examples. Have you ever thought back to a time when you've camped for a couple of days, been doing a lot of strenuous activity, and think back to the kind of sitting down by the campfire, which is in itself a really pleasant thing because we kind of evolved to sit around a campfire at night. But think about how the food tastes, and often we're eating pretty crappy, well, not crappy, but pretty basic food. We're not eating at a 5-star restaurant. But for me, a lot of those meals, even camping or maybe like backpacking, like traveling, and I've been walking on my feet all day and I eat something at a street stall, the food itself is not amazing, but everything tastes better because we're actually hungry. We actually kind of like, we've built up a natural hunger, and we've found a natural solution for that. We don't tend to eat large meals because we can't pack it in our packs and carry it. We tend to pack food that's pretty nutritious because we need the energy. So eating something that's going to give us a huge sugar blast and then drop away is just not going to cut it. And we tend to eat at reasonable hours, like just before the sun goes down. It's kind of too annoying to pack up, and I'll put together the food when it's in the middle of the night, so we don't tend to eat when we should be sleeping. And speaking of sleeping, we tend to go to bed when the sun goes down and wake up when the sun comes up. So altogether, just a much more kind of natural routine. So just hiking, another example of circuit breaking that sort of automatic eating. Okay, so what's the solution? I've spoken for a while about kind of why we want to keep noticing the fact that we're kind of eating automatically or eating on autopilot. And we can't be hiking all the time. We can't be starting or focusing on diets all the time, because that's not really natural either. We want to find a way to be more conscious of what we eat, while at the same time just living our regular life. I don't really have a solution for this, but I want to say that it's clear that when we get out of our way, when we stop kind of overriding our natural impulses by just like grabbing stuff and going for snacks and kind of eating very reactively and automatically, what I'm trying to say is you can actually kind of let go a little bit and let your body do the rest. It sounds a bit whimsical or like passive, but a really simple example would be when you hit midday and maybe you went out the night before and you're doing a little bit of work and you feel just literally tired, and maybe you haven't noticed that before, or maybe just you get a flash of it, but at that point there's a really simple solution which your body has already figured out and which can really handle it greatly, and that's taking a nap. So after 15-minute nap, 30-minute nap, you have kind of replenished a lot of energy and you're going to feel much better. So that's just one example of your body really kind of helping you out and saying, we can rebalance this quite quickly. You don't need to think through this problem. You don't need to look up on Google how to get more energy in the middle of the day. You literally just need to stop thinking and just go to bed. When I calorie counted and I had like a really big training day, I would take things very literally and ignore what my body was doing and do things like, okay, I've burned like 3,000, like 4,000 calories. Oh my God, to get back to my kind of balance, I've got to eat an extra 1,000 calories. And I would literally just go to the fridge and eat 1,000 extra calories. And often that would be pretty disgusting. That would be, bolognese and rice and just anything to get the right calories. And then I'd stop once I hit the 1,000. And it kind of worked. I was satiated, obviously, because I'd just eaten a shit ton of calories. But what I could have realistically done and would have been much healthier for my body and would have made me not bloated and sluggish would have been resting a bit and maybe eating a little bit with each meal naturally. Like, we just tend to be a little bit hungrier if we've burnt a huge amount of energy, and we can build that back up through different meals. Likewise, not pushing yourself training when you're tired and taking a break. So trying to listen to some of these cues will give you a bit of a solution there. So that's sort of it. So I think step one would be kind of making sure that you are, if you can at all, check those little moments when you're burping, when you're spilling food on your shirt, when you're rushing through the kitchen and you're throwing utensils into the sink, or you're opening up 5 cupboards in a row to find something that you weren't even sure what you're looking for. Take a breath. You don't need to be rushing that much, and it's going to really negatively impact eating properly for your body. Secondly, there's a lot of backup plans, and you're probably going to be all right if you just let your body handle your sleep or your hunger or your thirst. It'll tell you. So you don't need to kind of second guess yourself so much. That's sort of the gist of it. And I will put a link to the article.